What is happening? JGamer Dude here. Let's talk about Tony Hawk and the 25th anniversary. So Tony Hawk is apparently teasing something that's apparently insanely exciting for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater's 25th anniversary. So to give you a bit of context, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the original, came out in 1999 on the PS1, and the 25th anniversary, in fact, is falling this very month in September of 2024. More specifically, the 29th of September, but you could really take it or leave it with the exact date. But apparently something exciting has been announced. Well, not announced, something being teased rather. And so I've got this Polygon article by Mike McWhirter, and something worth pointing out is kind of just the history of Tony Hawk games as a whole. We've had so many very, very good Tony Hawk games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, even though it's very dated and doesn't play particularly well now, it was still a magnanimous game on its own. Pro Skater 2, Pro Skater 3, Pro Skater 4. Then we got Tony Hawk's Underground or Thug 2. Like, those were also some of the best games of all time as well. But then later on in the late PS2 to early PS3 generation, we did get games like Downhill Jam, which wasn't so great, though I suppose you could probably, split hairs on that one. Proving Grounds, which was kind of underwhelming. You've got games like Project 8, which was quite interesting and fascinating. And then you've got god-awful games, specifically those that came out on the DS and GBA, which you're only on like a half pipe and things like that, to the god-awful Tony Hawk HD thing that released in 2011 or 2012, I can't remember, which was god-awful and actually played very poorly, even though something like Tony Hawk 2X was perfectly fine on the Xbox, but is still a weaker game than the original Tony Hawk on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on the PS1. And then we got the best Tony Hawk game of all time, 1+2, which was pretty much jamming Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, slamming them together and adding the additional features like reverb and manuals and stuff like that from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, with like an insanely good paint job, so the game looks amazing and it feels and plays extremely well. Now, with that being said, however, I cannot agree with this enough. Please, Activision, give us more Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So you might be like, where's Activision involved? Well, let's have a quick look. So is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater coming back again? Tony Hawk won't explicitly say, but it certainly sounds like something's happening around the franchise's 25th anniversary. Again, keeping in mind, it's at the end of September, so 29th. According to recent comments from the Pro Skater himself, Hawk himself calls those developments insanely exciting. So I'm really wondering what the Birdman himself is actually kind of, popping up today. So in a new episode of a YouTube channel called Mythical Kitchen's Last Meal series, host Josh Schreier asked Hawk, what's next for the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise as we celebrate its silver jubilee? Hawk, who can pull off a 900 but can't disentangle himself from a non-disclosure agreement without hurting himself, responded, I wish I could tell you more, but I can tell you that I have been talking to Activision again. Now, this is something very important to mention, talking to Activision again. So the fact of the matter is that he actually stopped talking to Activision after the god-awful release of a bunch of poorly appreciated titles, specifically the whole thing that happened with Tony Hawk Ride, Tony Hawk Shred, which included that god-awful skateboard peripheral. I mean, you could literally put wheels on it and use it as an actual skateboard, but it had like those sort of motion movements. Oh god, Tony Hawk Motion was also a bad idea. Besides the point. Then you got the Tony Hawk HD remaster, I guess, which again I mentioned was absolutely god awful. And even worse after that, the final game that came out before we even got the 1+2 remake that just changed everything in the course of the Tony Hawk franchise was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which was god awful. It looked ugly, required so much fixing because of all of the bugs it had. to the point where the day one patch was double the size of the actual game itself. The game itself was like 4 or 5 gigs, and the patch was like 12 gigs. So just think about that for a moment. Anyway, so that's when he stopped talking to Activision, and ultimately is now talking to Activision once again. And I do wonder where all of this is going. But continuing on, we're working on something. This is the first time I've said that publicly. I can't give any detail, but I think it will be something fans will truly appreciate. The only thing I will truly be appreciating is if we got a 3+4 remake, which was also, keeping in mind, apparently in the works, but no longer was, or no longer happened to be after, or is no longer going through after the Xbox Activision acquisition that had happened. So there's that element to it again as well. There's so many little bits and pieces we can really dig in and talk about, despite the fact that, you know, this is actually a show called Last Meals, so it's all about food. That's really kind of like a bit of a joke. So the most recent entry was the first 2 Pro Skater franchises in 1 and 2. Remastered was the final game by Vicarious Visions before they was also absorbed into Blizzard Entertainment. So Vicarious Visions worked on most of the Pro Skater games throughout the lifetime of the franchise being under Activision. So worth keeping that in mind. Studio was working on remastered content from 3 and 4, but that was scrapped when Vicarious joined Blizzard. Okay, so it wasn't actually because of the Activision acquisition from Xbox. It was actually just when pretty much Vicarious got completely shut down effectively. Hawk's tease of new happenings around Pro Skater franchises of its 25th anniversary comes after a recent change to the series' social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter. The Tony Hawk Pro Skater profiles have received new logos in recent weeks, which is actually kind of interesting to know. But yeah, also it does note here in the article, I actually didn't read this article properly because I was kind of injecting my own know-how into the situation, but yes, it does say here September 29, 1999, that's when the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater came out. And the most recent original release was the god-awful Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which was god-awful, and Robomodo. These guys were the ones who also did Tony Hawk's HD as well, which was, yeah, widely planned. I think they meant to say widely panned by critics. Robomodo has since closed, and God, do they deserve to be shut down completely. But yeah. With all of that being said, though, I am very excited if it's a new game, but I feel like I shouldn't be, because if they've only just started talking recently, I don't think you could get a game out particularly quickly, especially with how development is going on in this current generation, that it takes years to get somewhere. The fact that Vicarious Visions was working on 3+4, and ultimately that ended up getting scrapped entirely after they shut down and were absorbed into Blizzard. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not particularly positive about what the news is going to be. I feel like any news is better than bad news, or any news is better than no news. But then there is also a chance it could be bad news. But the thing is that, hey, if Tony Hawk tells us to get excited, who are we to judge? But maybe that's all just entirely a marketing ploy, and really just to try and get us hooked on something that may not even be. Are they going to be bringing out Ride and Shred to PS5 and Xbox Series S and X? Highly doubted, but who knows what it could be. Downhill Jam? Are we going to be getting that over Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4? And I say that also with the understanding that there's a very well a chance that we might not be getting 3 and 4, but what's the possibility of getting a Thug 1 and Thug 2? Again, Thug 1, Thug 2, some of the greatest games made of all time, let alone skateboarding games, and the only games that rival those two are 3 and 4. I don't know, I'm just kind of putting it out there, but let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, I'm aiming for 300 subs by the end of the year, and with all that being said and done, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.